He came in before dawn, mop in hand, eyes on the ground. No one paid attention to him until the day a young SEAL candidate noticed the tattoo on his neck. In that moment, they realized a legendary ghost had been living among them for years. No one knew his name. On the duty roster, he was just listed as Maintenance Civilian Contractor. He wore the same uniform every day: gray coveralls, dark blue hoodie, scuffed boots that never quite lost the reddish dust from somewhere out west. He showed up every morning at 04:30 sharp, always before the instructors, always before the recruits. No one ever saw him arrive. He was just there, emptying bins, wiping mirrors no one thanked him for, cleaning sweat off mats. He never spoke unless spoken to, and even then, he kept it brief. Morning, copy, all yours. The SEAL compound gym wasn't like a normal gym. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was sacred. Every man who stepped through its doors knew that iron meant pain, and pain was the currency of transformation. Grunts, plates, and discipline filled the air. Candidates ran through circuits until their hands bled, and instructors pushed them harder than most human minds could comprehend. And yet every day, before the sounds of chalk and steel took over, he was there, sweeping, cleaning, restocking, disappearing. Most of the younger guys didn't even look at him. They were too focused on surviving the day. But some of the older instructors had noticed a few strange things: the way he folded towels, precise, tight; the way he stacked plates, always balanced by weight, not just size; the way he watched the new guys in the mirror, never staring, just observing, like he was scanning. He didn't wear headphones, never had a phone on him. And though he moved like a man with age in his back, there was something off. His knees didn't crack when he crouched, his hands didn't shake, and when he picked up a 45-pound bar to move it from one rack to another, he did it with a grip that hadn't softened in decades. Recruits joked once that he was probably some burnout or reject. One even whispered, probably applied years ago and washed out. But one of the older instructors, a former team leader named Jackson, had shut that down with a glance. Jackson was tough, quiet, and not prone to nonsense. But even he didn't look the janitor in the eye when he passed. The base had seen hundreds of civilians over the years: kitchen staff, drivers, contractors. But no one stayed long. The hours were brutal, the security intrusive. Most couldn't handle the environment, except him. He never complained, never took a day off, never got in anyone's way. The only detail anyone ever remembered was this: he always kept the hood up, even indoors, even in July. But one morning in the middle of summer, just after a brutal weight circuit, a recruit named Dawson collapsed onto a bench. He leaned forward to catch his breath and glanced sideways at the janitor who was wiping down the nearby floor. The hood had slipped just enough to expose a patch of skin behind the ear, tanned, scarred, and inked. Dawson stared at it, blinking sweat from his eyes. It wasn't a biker symbol, it wasn't tribal, it was military, very specific, a trident piercing a skull, the kind worn only by SEALs who had completed Tier 1 black missions, missions that weren't even acknowledged on paper. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched as the janitor straightened, adjusted his hood, and walked away silently, mop bucket trailing behind him like nothing had happened. But from that moment on, Dawson couldn't stop wondering, and neither could the rest of the compound. Dawson didn't say anything that day. He wasn't even sure what he'd seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or his imagination filling in blanks out of exhaustion. But the image stuck with him. The angle of the ink, the style of the lines, the faded clarity that only came from years in the sun. That night, alone in his bunk, he looked it up, scrolling through forums he wasn't supposed to know about. Operators, special missions, unconfirmed teams. Most of it was garbage, but some of the images matched. Not exactly, but close enough. Trident, skull, covert. The next morning, Dawson kept his eye on the janitor, not staring, just watching. He wasn't alone. Others had noticed the shift. The instructors started hesitating around him. The officers didn't rush him, and Jackson, the former SEAL-turned-trainer, watched him differently now. Not cautiously, not suspiciously, more like someone measuring distance between who they are and who they once served with. Someone finally asked a question. It was Grant, a big guy from Texas who had already washed out once and come back meaner. He made the mistake of calling out, half joking, "Hey, old man, you ever do more than clean sweat off the floor?" The gym went quiet. No one stopped training, but the noise shifted. The janitor didn't turn, didn't blink, just kept mopping the blood-stained corner of the mat where two candidates had gone too hard on grappling. Grant chuckled. Awkward. Guess not. And then Jackson walked over to him. No yelling, no threats. He just leaned in and whispered, "If you want to finish this program, I'd shut up and show some damn respect." That changed everything. Grant didn't say another word for the rest of the day. Word spread quickly after that. Quietly, some started calling him the Ghost. Others just referred to him as Sir without knowing why. He never responded to any of it. But his presence changed. He was still silent, still early, still invisible by routine. But now people noticed. He moved like he was mapping the room, eyes always tracking exits, weaknesses, posture. Some said he knew who was going to wash out before the instructors did. And then one afternoon, something happened that no one could ignore. The fire alarm went off during a weight circuit, false trigger, a tech malfunction from a new control panel. But per protocol, the gym was evacuated. Most recruits jogged out. Some instructors followed, but one trainee, Simmons, collapsed midway out. An old knee injury, worsened by dehydration, locked up completely. Two guys went back in, but froze near the entrance as smoke from the faulty wires began to cloud the hallway. It wasn't dangerous yet, but it would have taken a medic team at least 5 minutes to respond. It took the janitor 30 seconds. He walked straight into the smoke. No hesitation, no gear, just a towel wrapped around his mouth. He carried Simmons out on his back. Not a drag, not a struggle. A clean, perfect fireman's carry. One arm locking the leg behind the knee, the other across the shoulder, controlling the balance like he'd rehearsed it for years. Simmons was 215 pounds. The janitor didn't grunt once. When he emerged, eyes red but steady, he laid Simmons gently on the mat and stepped back without a word. The fire chief arrived moments later. They cleared the building. All safe, all fine. No one talked about it. No official report mentioned his name, but everyone saw it. The precision, the calm, the reflex. And later that evening, as Dawson walked past the janitor's cart, he noticed something new. A small patch sewn inside the front pocket, barely visible. Black thread on black fabric. Letters faded but clear if you looked close enough. ST6 SEAL Team 6. The kind of unit that doesn't confirm its members. The kind that doesn't leave paper trails. The kind that disappears men when they retire, if they retire. And suddenly everything made sense. The next morning, everything felt different. Not because anyone said anything, but because no one did. Just a quiet shift in energy, like the room had decided to recalibrate itself around someone they'd all misjudged. The janitor still came in at the same hour, still swept the same stretch of rubber flooring, but now people stepped aside when he passed, not out of fear, but out of something heavier. Respect. The kind you don't ask for. The kind you earn before anyone ever sees it. Jackson watched closely. He'd been quiet since the fire alarm incident. He hadn't approached the janitor. Not yet. But that morning, as the recruits finished their warm-up sprints, he walked over to the supply closet where the janitor usually disappeared for 10 minutes every break. He knocked once, opened the door, and stepped inside. The janitor was sitting on an overturned bucket, drinking black coffee from a dented thermos. He looked up slowly, eyes calm, unreadable. Jackson didn't sit. He just stood there a moment, then spoke. "I was in Kandahar 2007 to 2008. You were in that unit, weren't you?" The janitor didn't answer. Jackson nodded once, like that silence was all the confirmation he needed. "There was a story," he continued, "a black site outside Helmand, rescue operation, zero intel, no air support. 2 men went in, only 1 came out. They said the one who made it back carried the other half a mile under fire, stitched his own leg with a combat knife, and disappeared before the debrief. No name, just gone." The janitor stared at him, no expression, no reaction. Jackson took a breath. "Was that you?" A pause, Then finally the janitor spoke, calm, low. "You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answered." Jackson didn't smile. "That's what I thought." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "They think they're learning discipline in that gym, but you're teaching them something else, something none of us can put on a whiteboard." The janitor looked down at his boots. "They'll need it if they ever see what I've seen." And just like that, Jackson was gone. Word didn't spread, not out loud. But something changed in the days that followed. One morning, a group of instructors arrived to find the janitor's locker door slightly open. Inside was a folded American flag, a single pair of desert boots, and an old Navy Challenge coin resting on top of a worn name patch. The name said Hayes. No first name, no rank, just 5 faded letters. That afternoon, Dawson gathered enough courage to walk over while Hayes was coiling a battle rope for storage. "Sir," he said quietly, "if you were really one of them, why are you here?" Hayes didn't stop coiling. He just answered, "Because this is where they need me." Dawson hesitated. "Why not tell anyone?" Hayes finally looked him in the eye. "The day you need to tell people who you are is the day you've already forgotten." Then he stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and walked away. Dawson never asked again, but that night he stared at the trident patch in his locker a little longer. And when he went to bed, he slept, knowing that the man sweeping the mats might be the last line of silence between their world and the one no one talks about. From that day forward, no one called him the janitor anymore, not out loud. He was still listed that way in the roster, still punched in on the civilian time card, still signed every equipment request with a name no one dared repeat without lowering their voice. But around the compound, in the minds of every recruit and instructor who had caught even a glimpse of the tattoo on his neck or the silence in his stare, he was something else entirely. Hayes became part of the air, a quiet presence who moved through the gym like a ghost with purpose, never demanding anything, never interfering, but somehow always watching. Recruits began training harder when he was around. They stopped complaining about cold showers, about sore knees, about not making the cut. No one told them to. They just did. Because in the presence of a man who had nothing to prove and everything to carry, their excuses died quietly. One night, after lights out, Dawson pulled aside one of the new candidates and said, "If you ever see him watching you, don't try to impress him. Just don't screw up." The kid didn't understand yet, but he would. Jackson, meanwhile, never brought it up again. Not in briefings, not in reports. He didn't need to. Once, during a break between sessions, he left a folded note inside Hayes' supply cart. No signature, just 3 words. "You're still serving." Hayes never mentioned it, but the next morning, the battle ropes were coiled tighter than usual, and the squat racks had already been disinfected before anyone arrived. The compound's senior staff never formally acknowledged what they suspected. No background check had turned up a military record. No Navy file matched the man with that face. But those who knew how special operations really worked understood that the most effective warriors were often the ones who didn't leave paperwork behind. One afternoon, a visiting commander from Coronado recognized him. He was walking past the open gym doors when he stopped, stared, then whispered to Jackson, "You have no idea who that is, do you?" Jackson replied without looking, "No, but I know exactly what he is." The commander didn't ask more. He just nodded and walked away. The gym kept running. Recruits kept sweating. Instructors kept shouting. But every so often, when someone dropped a barbell without control, or slammed a locker door too loudly, or spoke out of turn, Hayes would appear in the corner of their eye just a second too early, just enough to make them sit up straighter. And sometimes, in the rare quiet moments before sunrise, he'd stop beside the mirror, lower his hood, and look at the face staring back. The tattoo on his neck, once hidden, now faded with time and sweat, still spoke louder than any salute ever could. He never told anyone his story. He never revealed his rank, his missions, or the names of the men who didn't come home. He just kept mopping the mats, coiling the ropes, scrubbing the blood from the tiles, until every recruit who passed through that gym understood exactly what it means to serve. He never wore a uniform, never gave orders, never asked for thanks. He simply showed up early, quiet, unnoticed, and did the work no one else thought mattered. But behind that mop and beneath that hood was a story no one could imagine, and a past that still stood watch over a place built for the strongest. Because sometimes, the men who've seen the worst don't tell you what they did. They show you how to carry it.